wants to visit the marine. Chapter 4. The Farallon Islands. Mr. Sullivan is sleeping, but Mrs. Sullivan hears Kate and Mike talking. She goes to their cabin and says, "Are you okay? Can't you sleep?"
"Mom,"
says Kate.
"please listen to me. I'm afraid."
Kate tells her mother about the ghost, and Mike and Carlos listen. "Are you sure, Kate?" says Mrs. Sullivan. "Sometimes dreams—"
"I'm sure, Mom,"
says Kate.
"Look at the water on the floor."
"I don't like this," says Mrs. Sullivan. "I'm going to talk to Dad tomorrow morning. There's something very strange about this boat."
"Oh, Mom,"
says Mike.
"I don't believe in ghosts. Science can explain everything. Kate dreams with her eyes open."
"That's not true,"
says Kate angrily.
"Do you remember the story of the old woman at the California Historical Museum?"
says Carlos.
"People say she's a ghost from the 1800s. She walks around the museum in a long black dress."
"Please don't tell us again,"
says Mike, laughing. "It's almost midnight," says Mrs. Sullivan. "Let's try to sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a fun day. Good night." The next morning, Mrs. Sullivan tells her husband about Kate's dream. He smiles and says,
"Dreams are only dreams."
Kate's face becomes red and she is angry.
"No one believes me."
After breakfast, Mr. Sullivan says,
It's a beautiful day today. Look at the blue sky. The temperature of the ocean is 9 degrees C. Put on your life jackets. We're going to visit the Farallon Islands. Bring your binoculars and digital cameras."
"Can Lucky come with us?"
asks Kate.
"No,
Says Mr. Sullivan.
the Farallons aren't the right place for a dog. Think of the poor birds."
"I'm sorry, Lucky.
Says Kate.
You have to stay on the boat."
Lucky looks at Kate with sad eyes and goes back to the galley. "I'm bringing a big lunch to eat on the island," says Mrs. Sullivan. "Do you have everything you need for your work, Frank?"
"Yes, everything's in my backpack. Let's see. I have my 3 notebooks, some pens and pencils, and my 2 cameras."
"Do you have your binoculars?" asks Mrs. Sullivan.
"Yes, they're in my backpack."
Says Mr. Sullivan.
"Let's go."
Says Kate.
"Who can help me put the lifeboat in the water?"
Asks Mr. Sullivan.
We can.
Say Kate, Mike, and Carlos together. They get into the lifeboat and go to one of the islands.
"This is fun,"
Says Carlos.
I can feel the ocean water on my face.
Says Kate.
"Me too.
Says Mike.
And it's cold."
After a few minutes, the lifeboat stops on the beach of the island and everyone gets off. They are surprised because they see hundreds of different kinds of birds near the beach.
"Here we are."
Says Mr. Sullivan.
"Remember, don't make a lot of noise. Look, there's a family of puffins, and there are some brown pelicans on the hill."
"Can we walk around?"
Asks Carlos.
"Of course."
Says Mr. Sullivan.
"You can walk around and take pictures. Use your binoculars, but remember, we're visitors here. The island belongs to the birds and the other animals. Let's meet at the lifeboat at noon."
The 3 friends walk around the island and take pictures. They see a lot of interesting seabirds. Mr. Sullivan studies the birds and the ocean and writes things in his notebook. Then he looks at the nests of the puffins and the pelicans. At noon, they meet at the lifeboat and have lunch together.
"Okay,
Says Mr. Sullivan.
now we can visit the other island."
"Seals and sea otters live there," says Mrs. Sullivan.
"Great!"
Say the 3 friends.
Let's go.
Says Kate.
I love seals and sea otters.
They spend the afternoon on the island. In the evening, they go back to the Pelican.
What a great day,
says Kate.
I have some beautiful pictures to show my friends.
The seals and the sea otters are wonderful animals,
says Carlos.
They're fast swimmers,
says Mike. After dinner, Kate, Mike, and Carlos are tired and go to bed. Good night, guys, says Mrs. Sullivan. We're sailing to Point Reyes tomorrow,
Please don't dream about ghosts tonight, Kate.
says Mike.
Let's forget it, Mike.
Says Kate angrily. Carlos laughs and closes the cabin door.
Well, I want to work on my notes.
Says Mr. Sullivan.
I have a lot of interesting information.
I can help you, Frank, says Mrs. Sullivan. They stay in the galley and work on the computer. After about an hour, they hear something. Frank, can you hear a noise? Says Mrs. Sullivan. It's like a bell, a ship's bell. Mr. Sullivan listens and says,
I can hear it. It is a ship's bell.
Perhaps someone at sea needs help, says Mrs. Sullivan. Let's go on deck and see. It is a clear night with a full moon and there is no fog. From the deck, they see a small yellow light far away and they hear a bell.
What's that light?
Asks Mr. Sullivan. I don't know, Frank, says Mrs. Sullivan, but someone's shouting far away,
You're right, Liz.
says Mr. Sullivan.
This is weird.